And we are live. Welcome, everybody, to our milestone of episode 10. Tonight, we have a special presentation. We have Brendan and Aaron in the house, and we're going to be discussing scenario bags. We're going to go a little bit in depth on the different types, the philosophy versus the practicality of them, and all kinds of good stuff. All right, so tonight, let's see here. I'm going to pop a little, we're going to do a little bit of different. We're trying to do shorter episodes. And so I'm going to pop a couple of questions out there for the guys that chime in on, and then we'll move into some of the different types of bags. So the first question for everybody is, what are scenario bags in general? What do you guys think they are? And what do you guys think they are? Let's just go that route. Brendan, you want to start?
Sure. So for me, I don't care what you call it, bug out bag, get home bag, inch bag. It's all the same. It's to what scale. All my bags I put as a scalable item. It's going to be pretty much the same stuff. It's just, is this enough sustainment for 3 days? Is it enough sustainment for a week? Am I living out of this for the next month and a half? For me, and everybody's different based on their skill level. I've got a pretty bare bones bag. My bag's boring. It's mostly calories because that's something that's not super easy to replicate in the situations I find myself in. That's another thing. I actually use mine. So I live out of mine a couple months every year just by nature of doing the disaster relief or doing backcountry hunts or things like that. And that's how I figured out what I use and what I don't use. My rule of thumb is if I don't use something 2 trips in a row, unless it's like medical or something like that, it comes out. And then I'll try a new piece of kit in the future. For me, mine is mostly Dave Canterbury's 5 C's. So container, cordage, cutting tool, combustion, and cover. Now, what that looks like for me might look different than, you or Aaron. It'll look really different from someone who doesn't have any bushcraft skills or any wilderness survival skills. A container for me is a single wall stainless steel Stanley cup because I can boil water in it and purify my water. If you're not confident in making fires, that's useless to you. So you might want a Nalgene bottle and a water filter. Speaking of which, 1 second.
Got to stay hydrated.
So this was a Father's Day gift from my 13-year-old. It's I guess a 2-quart Nalgene bottle that has a life straw inside of it. So that's going in the kit. It's neat little thing. So that might be more useful to someone who doesn't have the fire making experience I have. That would be really useful if you're going into an area that doesn't have sticks everywhere. We live in Florida. There's always a plethora of dead branches lying on the ground. If I'm in Colorado in the San Luis Mountains, where the tallest piece of wood is a tumbleweed, and my options of drinking is the Rio Grande, that's single wall container ain't doing me any good. I want that water filter, cutting tool, self-explanatory. I keep a couple of them. My main EDC, it's a Milwaukee razor knife because I always have a sharp blade. This particular one also has 3 different screwdrivers and a bottle opener on it. But in my bug out bag, I keep a Glock field knife because it's robust. It's a good sturdy knife. And for like $25-$30, you can't beat it. Cordage, again, self-explanatory. For me, a a lot of times I'm hammock camping. So I have like 6 or 8 sections of pre-measured rope paracord. I've got a couple of 10-foot sections, couple of 8-foot sections, couple of 6-foot sections, and then some, you know, 50, 50-foot hanks of them. I like mule rope. It's this flat 1,250-pound tensile straight mule rope, mule string. Everybody calls it something different. I like that stuff. It folds flat. It's super strong. Combustion, everything, all the fire. Don't everyone's. Oh, I got my ferro rod. That's cool. I've got a badass ferro rod too. You know what is right next to my badass ferro rod? 2 big lighters and stormproof matches.
Yeah.
Because when you need it now. That ferro rod is awesome when I need it. When I'm soaking wet because I fell out of the canoe and it's 40 degrees outside,
Yeah.
I ain't grabbing that fucking ferro rod.
Yeah.
Sorry, for cussing, family friendly.
Yeah.
But and then lastly for cover, I use a poncho, just a camouflage poncho. Works well for me because again, all my stuff's kind of centered in that small frame, ultralight kind of setup. That might look like something else for somebody else. My kids all have the same setups in their camping/hunting bags. My kids like tarps. It's easier for them to manipulate. You can run a string of paracord, throw it over. Now you have a tent. It's just something simple. So different things for different skill levels. After that, the rest of my bag is trauma IFAC and calories, either freeze dried foods or MREs. I got a few other things in there. Electric tape because redneck band-aids. It works great for everything. Pencils and writing stuff because I get bored and I doodle. And I'm always writing notes, but also fire starter, you can use the paper to light fires. Hygiene stuff. I keep a little backpacker's toothbrush. It's pretty much just a toothbrush that's been cut off at 1.5 inches. And then activated charcoal soap just to keep me fresh.
Yeah.
And most of my kits are an add-on to that. So the bug out bag that lives next to my bed until it goes in the truck, and in which case it lives in the truck and then it just stays with me. That's the basics of that. I have mine set up for 3 days. If I wanted it set up for 2 weeks, it's pretty much going to be the same bag. It's just more calories, or some extra ammo, depending where I'm going, things of that nature. I'll let Aaron go on before we get into the sustainment and the other stuff, because I know you had some other things you wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
So your original question was, what do we think a scenario bag is? And to me, that's was kind of trying to look into a crystal ball and figure out what's going to happen and when. I haven't met anybody that reliably can tell the future. So I try to be aware of likely scenarios and then pack bags around dealing with as many of them as possible without getting mission creep on my bag that's heavy enough that it's unmovable in the field. I've walked with some pretty heavy loads on my back for long distances. I really don't like doing it. I'm not as young as I was when I was doing it originally. The spirit may be willing, but the lumbar spine is pretty customized at this point. So for me, I try to make a lot of my kits nest with each other. And we've talked about in other episodes how I'm a huge fan of history. So I go back to guys that had similar requirements to what we have, and I find a lot of use in looking at the mountain men. They would always have their possibles bag on them, and because their pants didn't have any pockets in them, go figure. Pockets are awesome. I try to have as many as I can on me at all times. But that was kind of like their EDC. And then they would have, little day packs that they would take out, or 3-day packs that they would take out. And then they'd have a giant pack back at camp where they might be processing,
Mm-hmm.
the gains from one of their trap lines or something like that. So that's kind of the approach I try to have when I put together kits of my own. And also like thinking a little bit about legalities and how this looks if I'm looked at,
Mm-hmm.
talked to, and then stopped and searched. Those are, all three of them different deals. I mean, we can see, even in not being political, just for mentioning it as a recent event, Kyle Rittenhouse, he was pretty well prepared for the scenario that he found himself in.
Mm-hmm.
But that took, almost 2 years to finally have everything come out.
Yep.
So there's definitely, in today's day and age, worrying about how you look when you're around other humans has a big concern for me when I go and do this stuff. So
it brings in Gray Man. Gray Man has many faces is the way I like to look at it. Sometimes people want to wear not just preparedness, but anything that they're into. They want to wear it on their sleeve or on their chest or with their hat. They, maybe they're proud of it. They're putting bumper stickers on their car, or they're wearing their MAGA hat or FJB or,
yep.
F Trump or whatever it is. It's like they want to shout it out without shouting it out.
No, they want to be as in your face as humanly possible to the level that they think they can socially get away with.
Yeah.
Most people don't relish confrontation. They don't want to actually be bothered, but they do want to get their digs in on people that they view as their social or cultural enemies.
Yeah.
And, it's like you wear that FJB hat, or, you dress in a way that screams to everybody, hey guys, I'm a vet. Come up and thank me for my service. Like I have one grunt style t-shirt, or two, actually. They were both given to me.
Yeah.
Hey,
I see some guys in trucks mostly, but sometimes cars, like all the decals they have.
Yeah.
It screams, I'm into guns. And I probably have lots of guns in my car. So break into me and look for these guns.
Yep. I have a friend that got into a road rage incident on the east coast of Florida several years ago. And he's a Puerto Rican guy, former law enforcement over there and over here. And the miscreants that he got into the road rage incident with, of which there were several in their vehicle, when the officer arrived to deal with the incident, they told him he had pulled his gun on these guys. There were four males in the vehicle together, and he said, "No, I didn't." And the officer said, "Well, are you carrying right now?" He said, "Yeah, I am. I'm licensed to carry." And he had a Glock bumper sticker on the back of his truck. He said, "Ask him what color my gun was." I said, "Oh, it's black." Everybody knows Glock's black, right? He was carrying his silver SIG. He's a competition shooter.
Oh.
So that day he was like, "Any other questions?" So, and it's like the old joke too. What do you get when you break into a Toyota Tacoma? Usually a Glock or an XD. So.
Oh man, that's funny. All right, so let's move on to the next question here. What's the practicality versus the psychology behind the various scenario bags, kits, and boxes? So we'll start with Aaron this time, since Brendan started first last time. This is your opinion that I'm asking.
Yeah, I've got one of those, so that's great. But
never would have thought of that from you.
Yeah. No one's ever described me as unopinionated.
Yeah.
But I've seen a lot of guys in the prepping world over the years, and most of the stuff that I see on bug out bags and inch bags and whatever you want to call them. It's like it's a way to solve being afraid of a situation with gear over tools, or gear over skills rather. And then it's also a way to signal like how cool you are and how into what some people just kind of view as a hobby versus like a lifestyle. You know, they'll talk to you about, oh, well, you've got that life straw. I've got a Katadyn, or I've got a Trowling Berkey, or I made my own filter. It's like, dude, I don't give a crap. Like, can you drink out of that pothole? Cool. The only way that I might care is like if you can do it cheaper than I did, because I never seem to have too much free money floating around. About 4 different places for every dime I get to go. So, like that I'm interested in, but outside of that, it's like I don't care. And then that's the practicality or the psychology of it. The practicality always tends to be like, how much have you used your stuff? When I was growing up and hiking, there was like a phrase that got repeated by a lot of people that I saw, and it was the more you know, the less you carry. So you see a dude who's doing ultralight stuff, and like, I had some hiking friends that they would go out in teams of 3 to group hike, and they'd have one person carrying a knife. And like, because I mean, they're measuring things in ounces and fractional ounces. They're trying to get to as light as humanly possible, but they'd actually make, 20, 30 miles in a day. They'd freaking hump it in the heat in Florida. So like, awesome, but that practicality is always like, that tells me the most about a person when it's like, how much have you used that stuff? We at one of the old prepper meetings that I used to help run, like we had to bring in your bug out bag day and get everybody else's comments on it. We did see some interesting stuff, but we had 2 people that had been coming for a while, and all of their stuff is still in the packaging. Like they had these giant MREs bags that they hadn't field stripped an MRE. And if you don't know what field stripping an MRE is, ask anybody who was a grunt, and they'll tell you. So, but like that tells you so much about somebody. Like, is that knife worn? You were talking about like in the Glock field knife, Brendan. I love the Mora knives for just a beginner knife. They're carbon steel. And they're like $15.
It's what I used to carry, and then I broke 2 of them batoning.
Yeah. Well, but like I've gotten mine. I stash them in all over the house, and I think I paid $6 for them over at Rural King on one of their Christmas sales. So if I break one, they're at my house. I'm not going to be too terribly sad about that. I'll just go to like take 3 steps and grab another tool. So that's kind of like that's my 2 cents or my opinion, I guess, since you asked.
Well, what I would add in, okay, I equate a lot of people with the bags. They do what people similarly do with any collectible kind of thing. In the sense, it's like a hobby. Hey, I'm into squishmallows, or I'm into the figurines. These are all feminine things, but trading cards or whatever. Now, what I wouldn't mind as much is if they were like, hey, I got this Pete Rose rookie card, blah, 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 or from this season, and he had these stats or whatever. I'm like, okay, I can get, I'm not into it, but I can get that. But you literally got people that are just watching other people's videos, or you need these top 10 or top 20 things in your bag. And they literally go and collect it like action figures. Okay. And got it in the closet. They might brag about it to their friends or whatever. They might open 1 or 2 pieces, but don't practice with it. Don't pack it and take it out on a practice run. They just collect it. And then when the next shiny thing comes out, they go get that. You see that in the gun space. the general gears for the bobs. Because the gun space is just as bad, if not worse, than the guys that are into souping up Japanese cars with nitrous and this thing and that thing and making it loud. That's like guys putting a special flash suppressor or I don't even know what it's called, just to make their gun louder. Just like the guys, they, put the certain particular mufflers on their car. So I wish there was more practicality and skill use and practice than there is. This is where the hoarding portion stigma of preparedness gets proven out, because a lot of times people are just hoarding stuff. They might just do gear and guns, or they might do food. They generally don't do both. There's always exceptions, but and then the hoarding it and not FTXing with it. Now, why is the psychology? I think they're filling holes in their mental health, just like anybody else that turns to distractions, whether you're collecting cards or figurines, or you start tapping into stimulants and stuff like that. People do all this stuff because there's a hole in their heart, their soul, and their psyche, and they're just filling it with that, whether it's ice cream or pet rocks. It don't matter. What about you, Brendan? What do you think?
So for like a practicality spot, I think bug out bag, get home bag, whatever you want to call it, I think those are important. However, you can solve a lot of your problems by being set up properly. Having a good car kit, right? So, for instance, pop the back seat in my truck. I have a jack in there, a way to change a tire, a way to pull down my spare tire if I need to. I have a come along. I have some chains. I have some straps. I have tire plug kits. I do have a small amount of food in there. Just a little bit of canned food. It stays under I have a little compartment under my back seat, so it's out of the sun and all that. And then a little cook kit, just camp cook kit, as well as that basic version of the 5 C's pretty much in there. And that way, if for whatever reason I do break down, as well as I also keep 1 quart of every fluid that my vehicle needs just to get me somewhere if need be, be it oil, transmission fluid, power steering fluid, things of that nature. And that stuff lives in there. That way, if I break down, I can fix it enough to get me somewhere. Or if it's beyond that and it's a SHTF situation, I have enough in it to get me home, as well as I have some capability in there as well. Like whenever I leave the state and go out doing my grindstone stuff, I add 20 gallons of fuel chained in the bed of my truck, and it's literally just, that's what my truck has for a gas tank size. So as I'm driving about, I try not to get below half. And if I'm doing long haul drives, so for instance, this last one I did, the furthest point away I was Ohio, Southern Ohio. So it's a 13-hour drive. It's, almost, no, I don't even remember. I think maybe 800 mile, 900 mile. I don't recall off the top of my head. But, I get 450 miles to a tank full. So if I have a full tank and I've got 20 gallons in the back of my truck, I can get home. It'll be close, but it'll get me home. Or worst case scenario, let's say I got a quarter tank in my truck and I could just got the 20 in my back. Well, shoot, Georgia's a heck of a lot closer of a walk than Ohio.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think practicality wise, it makes a lot more sense to have a vehicle kit. And one of the things you were laying out earlier, I don't remember if it was during the recording or before, just a house kit. My wife That's her thing. She's not a huge fan in like get home bags. She has one, but her thing, because we have 4 kids, she sets up boxes for in the moment. Power goes out, she pulls out 2 boxes, and it's battery powered fans and lights for the kids and snacks. And snacks that don't require any heating or anything like that. She starts passing everything out, gets everybody content. Cool. Now let's figure out what our next game plan is. And same thing in the vehicle. I was telling you guys, her version of a get home bag is this giant stroller wagon thing that has good shoes for her in it, fresh clothes for the kids, and snacks and hydration. That way, she has to abandon the vehicle, load up all the kids in this wagon, start walking, and her and the 13-year-old plan to switch off as need be.
Yep.
You know, so it's having the practicality of what's most likely to happen. Am I going to need to walk home 60 miles under the current state of things? Probably not, unless I choose to.
Right.
Will I get a flat tire? 100% guaranteed it's going to happen. I don't care if it happens tomorrow. I don't care if it happens next year. I don't care if it happens in 3 years. It's going to happen. That's just happens with maintenance. Is my vehicle going to break down? 100%. I don't care if you have a brand new 2025. Things happen, you know? It is what it is. So it's like, you know, the old, why do you prep? Everyone's, oh, I'm prepping for the EMP. I'm prepping for the nuke. Start with the hurricane. We know that's coming. We know you're getting a storm. You're going to lose power for, you know, a week, 10 days, whatever. We know that's going to happen. Start with that. You load back 2 weeks worth of stuff, 30 days worth of stuff. You're better than 90%. If you've got a flat tire, tire patch kit, and a come along in your truck, well, shoot, that's going to solve 75, 80% of whatever problem you're going to come across, you know? So
Yeah.
that for me on the practicality and like the psychological, the psychology of it. You have a level of confidence there too. So I know for me, I might take a little bit of a risk if I know I have recovery equipment in the truck versus no, that place is just flat out impassable. Is it impassable? I don't know. You don't really know until you try, you know? I mean, other than skill, I'm not going to drive a Toyota, you know, Corolla through like 12 inches of water. That's insane. But like with my truck, I got to come along on a couple of straps. So if I see a spot that looks pretty muddy, I'm going to gun it if I need to get somewhere. And if I get stuck, cool. We'll pivot. We'll get unstuck and then move on. You know, so.
Well, you know, the ironic thing is that, especially with the people that prepare for all the apocalyptic stuff, all the big stuff that where it's plausible but not probable compared to everything else. But the things that you were mentioning about preparing for are the things that would happen during those apocalyptic things. And it won't be as forgiving. Getting a flat tire, running out of gas, you know, needing more fluids. There's nobody around that is open to get that stuff, or you're stuck in the middle of nowhere, or you're stuck and people are acting bad where you don't want to be stuck. So
I think a lot of people, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
Yeah, but just like with the hurricane. So a lot of these things that were, my point being is that, hey, there's these normal time things that can happen to you where these kits would be valuable. They're highly probable to happen. Okay. Just without anything crazy happen. But during a hurricane, you know, post hurricane, post tornado, post hailstorm, or some regional crisis or whatever, these things are more likely to happen. So it's like you can use them during normal times and during these, I call them light crises, like if we get a hurricane, it's mostly in Florida, maybe Georgia. So we get regional people to come in and help. But if you're trying to escape or come back and you can run out of gas because you're stuck in traffic, okay. But it's like, stop just focusing on the EMP and everything shuts off. If you have these other things, they're like mini kits to go into your overall plan. They're like EDC variations, flat tire, run out of gas, car overheats, simple stuff that you should be able to handle yourself and not need, some special apocalypse diesel engine vehicle made from 1980 because it's EMP proof. This is where the fascination people get into. They want to do all these weird things, or just like, I don't want to say weird, but the plausible things, but not the highly probable things. So go ahead.
I think a lot of it is people think about the immediate problems that require immediate solutions. And it's like, okay, if somebody goes to mug me, I want my gun. That's an immediate problem that requires an immediate solution. Okay, I have a hole in me, I want my tourniquet. That's an immediate problem that requires an immediate solution. Now, both of those things are very valid, and both of those things need to be checked off. Comma, I'm going to get hungry in 6 hours. So yeah, you should have food in your bag. If you have a 40-pound bag and there's 2 cans of soup and a bag of beef jerky, there's a problem if you have more gear than food in there.
Right.
And then also, if you have a tourniquet on, guess what? It's going to come off, and we now have to make sure that wound doesn't get infected. It stays clean. It stays irrigated, things of that nature. So yes, have your tourniquet. Also have a 5-gallon bucket full of roll gauze, iodine, things of that nature, gloves, gauze, tape, disinfectant, the 4, pillars of medical. Like, it's the 4 pillars aren't tourniquets and chest seals and nasopharyngeal airways for a reason. Like, is all that stuff super, super important and super, super valuable? Absolutely. If you've ever seen a car accident or any scenario where EMTs are called, paramedics are called, do the debris field when they're done, from just constantly ripping open, here's fresh gauze, here's fresh bandages, here's new gloves on, rip those off because they're contaminated, put on new gloves. And it's just, there's so much crap on the ground. Never once seen an EMT put a tourniquet on, in my scenario. But they're using an absolute insane amount of stuff.
Yeah.
Because that stuff's important. That's the sustainment of it. It's like, I feel like, again, that back to that immediate problems immediately, people don't think generally about sustainment and maintenance. They think about the right now. So gun solves problem right now. Tourniquet solves problem right now. Get home bag with, $1,000 of gear solves problem right now. But there's no sustainment behind it. The maintenance aspect of your vehicle is more important, than, is it nice to have a quart of oil in your truck? Yes, you should have a quart of oil in your truck. Have you not done any of your fluid changes and now your vehicle's got a blown head gasket and it drinks oil? That's a problem, because now that quart of oil is going to last you a couple miles versus get you where you need to go. So the maintenance and the sustainment, I feel, gets overlooked a lot.
Yeah. Well, I think some guys are more focused on, they have more magazines for their gun or guns than they do MREs or medical supplies.
Which, don't get me wrong, have all the magazines you want. But if you have, 20 guns and 10,000 rounds of ammo, but you don't have that same, stockpile for gauze and disinfectant, And don't get me wrong, yeah, I have found myself in disparagencies like that. When I first started, I was a firearms collector for years, still do. And I got more kids now, so I don't have the money to spend like I want to on firearms. But when you find yourself with 4 gun safes and you have more guns than safe space, but you don't have iodine, or uh, alcohol or hydrogen peroxide, things of that nature, which each one has a different purpose. If you don't have the knowledge of that, back to like what Aaron was saying, with the more skill you have, the less you need.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that can work in several different ways. If you're only using alcohol to sterilize your tools, your surfaces, and your body, you can cause tissue damage. If you're only using hydrogen peroxide to sterilize everything, you can cause tissue damage. Iodine is for people, hydrogen peroxide is for tools, alcohol is for surfaces. Now, can it be done? Absolutely. We've all squirted a rag with alcohol and wiped off a cut. It's okay. But in a scenario where you're going to be irrigating a wound regularly, I'd much rather do it with a syringe full of saline than a syringe full of alcohol. Gauze. Can you rip up old T-shirts and boil them for gauze? 100%. You can get a 48 pack of gauze off Amazon for $10. Instead of buying that next box of 5.56, buy some gauze, buy some triple antibiotic, buy some Neosporin, buy tape.
Yeah.
Like I said, the 4 pillars of medical is glove, tape, gauze, disinfectant. You start loading 5-gallon buckets of that stuff, we're good. If you get one egregious wound, chainsaw, I know I've completely derailed the conversation. Sorry about that. Let me just throw this in there and I'll shut up.
Yeah.
But you get one egregious wound, chainsaw, gunshot wound, whatever it may be. Let's say it's to your leg. All right, you put on your tourniquet, you're good. You're golden. You're alive. Now what? Okay, well, if you put a tourniquet on, chances are it's an arterial bleed. Now, how do we find that artery and get it cut off? Now, you can stitch the artery, you can tie off the artery. I don't recommend cauterizing the artery. You can cause worse infection with that. That's cowboy movie stuff. Can you get to the artery? Because arteries retract because our bodies are really cool and they constrict and they will help stop the bleeding on their own if it's a clean cut. So then you have to address that problem. Okay, let's say we've addressed that problem. By some miracle, your neighbor's a surgeon. That problem's addressed. Now we have to irrigate that wound and change those bandages 2 to 3 times a day. We have to do this for 6 months. So if you've got 6 months, talking 180 days, you got to change that, let's say minimum twice a day. So brain's not going to work on me. That's 360, units of gauze, be it 4x4s, roll gauze, whatever. That's for one wound. So you buy 360, let's say 350 for round numbers. You get 350 things of roll gauze and then an equivalent amount of 4x4s with your iodine. So if it's like $10 for just about 50, so $20 with the 4x4s and the roll gauze, then you're coming out to what? You need 7 sets of that. So 20 and 7, you're $150 roughly. Say you spend $50 in iodine and a bucket to put it all in. So you're at $200 to fill one 5-gallon bucket for one wound. Do you need that Glock clone? Do you need that super cool, ultralight, camping blow up mattress that costs $78
Mhm.
that you maybe will use once on a walk home? Or should you put it in a 5-gallon bucket of medical supplies and put it in the corner? It's like for years, my sleep kit on my bug out bag was nothing, because when I've gone hunting in the past, you find a tree with a nice little crook in it, and you sit leaning up against that tree. And that's how I did it. And then I upgraded to a little $10 foam accordion mat and did that for years. And last year I upgraded to a $17 ultralight blow up mattress that folds up about this big, but is a kick ass blow up mattress. You upgrade as you need.
Yeah. Trial and
However,
error. Yeah.
exactly, trial and error. Now, that being said, is that what I take on my grindstone deployments? No, I got a $60 cot with whoopies and beautiful linen blankets and a pillow. I live nice when I go on the grindstone deployments, but again, capability. I'm not planning on being there 3 days. I'm usually there a couple of weeks, and I'm usually working pretty extensively around dangerous stuff. So I need a good night's sleep. So back to what we were talking about earlier with like the sustainment capabilities and like adding on.
Mhm.
I have my bug out bag that lives in my truck, lives next to me wherever I go. But like the grindstone stuff, I have grindstone boxes because my mission has changed at that point. I have more capability in my grindstone boxes because I need more capability.
Mhm.
Can I do an entire grindstone deployment living out of my bug out bag? Absolutely. Is it nicer if I have a cot and a jackery and my radios and 2 or 3 whoobies to keep nice and snugly?
Yeah.
Way better. And then I'm more effective. So it's just knowing what your likelihood is and your mission set is.
Yeah.
Is it like that? So with grindstone deployments, I know exactly what I'm getting into. So I know what my mission statement is there. I know, or my mission set rather. I know the practicality of what I'm going to need. Is it going to make sense for me to bring a hot plate and a full-on cook set, or like a butane jet boil on a grindstone deployment? I've brought them a couple times. I've never used them, so I don't bring them anymore. Now, that jet boil makes a lot more sense in my bug out bag, because if I'm walking home
Mhm.
and I need to eat and I don't have access to power, boom. So that lives in the bug out bag now. Do I need it on a grindstone deployment? No, not really. Do I take it anyway? I mean, it's in the bug out bag, so yeah, it gets brought, but
Yeah. Well, it makes a big difference if you're able to live out of your truck versus hoofing all your gear out into the wilderness.
exactly. That's a big one too. So my bag, last time I weighed it, bag with my rifle, I was at 35 pounds. So, I carry an AK with a couple of 40 rounders in it. So the bag itself is probably high 20s, 27, something like that, if I had to guess. So having that, just carrying that, is a level of capability. Being able to load your truck up and have that capability. Aaron, you were talking about the mountain men earlier. That's my stuff. I love old mountain men memoirs, the biographies, the diaries, all that stuff. The way they would set their camps up. So on their person, they would have their possibles bag, like Aaron mentioned. And their possibles bag, most of them would state, was sustainment for about 7 days. Then you had, if you had a horse or a mule with you, that horse or mule might have 2 weeks worth of stuff on it.
Mm-hmm.
And then you would have your camp, where your camp would be essentially a small homestead for them. It'd be a sustainable location. So a lot of these guys, they would go on 2-year trips. So they would leave home for 2 years, set up a hunting camp, and then from there they might go trek off for 2-3 weeks a month from their camp in whatever direction. So they might still be 2 weeks away from their camp, which only has a month worth of setup or whatever, you know. So it all depends, but it's layered. It's all stacked on top of each other. If you get ran out of camp, you've got your mule with 2 weeks. If your mule gets killed and you run off, you have your possibles bag with a week. You know, the modern equivalent would be I've got my bug out bag, my 72 hours, which when you look at what they carried versus what we carry, what would sustain me 72 hours, what would sustain you 72 hours, those guys, that's a 2 weeks, 3 weeks for them, you know? They were just different humans, man. Those are
Oh yeah.
strong people. You look at Daniel Boone, you know, some of his stories, trekking off. In some cases, like stories of him leaving with literally a knife, a rifle, and like 20 shots worth of powder and lead, and just disappearing for 2 years, and then coming back with enough furs and whatnot to like sustain his homestead, and you know, pay off any debts. He was notorious for
Oh
being
yeah.
bad with money.
And they'd live off the land. I mean,
Yeah.
literally, they would fish and hunt. You
Yeah.
know, and when I say hunt, it's not like, oh, they went and shot an elk. Oh, these guys were eating rabbits and squirrels and like a lot of small game that you'd get with snares.
Yeah, so a lot of that stuff, when you look at, so there's different eras, right? So like Daniel Boone, that was more of the long hunter era. That wasn't the mountain men. Mountain men kind of came later. Mountain men did more of the small game. This is like the large game. Not wasn't wiped out, but it was definitely put a dent in. But like the long hunters, they had a lot more large game, but small game was definitely a thing. One of the things, like in Daniel Boone's memoirs, he would talk about. So Daniel Boone would spotlight deer, which, you know, everyone always, I think we revere people to some degree. There's a really good book called The Long Hunters by Steve Ranella and Clay Newcomb.
Yeah.
And it talks about Daniel Boone and a lot of that. So, you know, I say he spotlights deer, and everyone's like, well, you know, how do you do that without a flashlight? He would polish a plate, a pewter plate, and then he would string it up on top of a torch with a small fire, and then he would run it up, you know, 10 foot tied to his back, and then ride at night looking for the glint off deer's eyes in the woods. And they see this giant, you know, ball of fire in the sky. They're wondering what the hell's going on, so they walk out to look at it, and he'd shoot him.
Oh
Like, you do
man.
whatever you can. He was notorious for trespassing on farms. He would walk right onto your farm, pop off 3 ears of corn that's going in his bag. He's leaving, you know. Everyone thinks of him as an American hero. He spent his last few years working for the Spanish government. He actually abandoned America and like renounced his citizenship. Yeah, the U.S. government hated Boone, but you know,
We're in good company then.
right. But there's those guys did legitimately everything they could or they had to. A lot of these guys, they were foragers who would come across game. You know, they talk about like beaver tail. Beaver tail was known by the mountain men and the long hunters as being one of the most delicious things you could ever eat. It's literally a giant slab of fat. That's all it is. But they were so fat starved that to them there was nothing better, you know. Also, these guys aren't killing these animals just for meat. There's been a lot of cases where they would kill the animals and not even touch the meat. So in their case, a lot of it was hides because the hide was more valuable than meat. So you would only carry as much meat as you were going to eat, and then you would take the hide to trade with the natives or take it back to, civilization and trade it there. What's more valuable? Because that's another thing. These guys, this was their job. They weren't doing this as a hobby. They weren't doing this for fun. This was their job. So, do I keep one deer skin that was the equivalent of $1 at the time? That's where we get the term buck. It was actually put on a vote. It was almost a bear. So one bear skin and one deer skin were both worth $1, and we almost called it a bear. However, the white-tailed deer was more famous and more popular as an animal, so they went with a buck.
Oh man!
So, but $1 back then, shoot, you could get a good rifle for $12. So you equate that today to a $600 rifle. Yeah, I don't know what the percentage on that is, but $1 is a good couple days worth of stuff. So are you going to carry 50 pounds of meat, which to them, if you're shooting 4 or 5 deer a day, you're going to take one of those deer's meat and then leave the rest. Now, in our situation, no one's buying fur like that. So we're not going to, the meat's more valuable to us than the fur would be.
Yeah.
But, different times, different things.
Yeah, very interesting. All right, so this podcast is going very fast, so I want to skip a couple of things.
Sorry,
it's so
I derailed everything.
Oh no, well, you know what? We always have great conversations, and trying to keep. I mean, we can go easily 3 hours, and it's just so to go so much shorter is a lot more challenging. But
this podcast should be sponsored by Adderall.
Yeah. Well, we can last the 3 hours. It's just the audience. Will they sit there and last 3 hours?
Yeah.
There was an interesting acronym that came up when I was doing some research on TikTok to figure out how we could start doing some short form content on TikTok and Reels and YouTube Shorts. And one of the guys I follow, he had a video and he called it a scare bag, and I want to give him credit. Let me see. I think I wrote his name down somewhere. Well, I'll have to try to remember it or put it in the show notes. But he called it a scare bag, which the acronym stands for Social Chaos and Response Emergency. Now, I messaged him, or I put a comment in the video, said, "Hey, did you come up with this, or was somebody else?" So we're gonna be doing a podcast video on YouTube. I want to give credit. I didn't hear back from him.
Shazad Kayani is what you have from TikTok.
Yep, that's his name. Yeah. So I was watching his video, give him credit for that. I don't know if he created it or got it from somewhere else, but nonetheless, I found that pretty interesting. And I'm gonna do a quick rundown of what he had in the bag, and you guys give me your comments, okay, and what you think was, good or not. And the way he presented in the video, it's like if you get caught up in a protest or a riot, not being the one participating, okay, the way I'm taking it, but someone trying to escape from it, what would work out good for you? So he said to have a non-tactical backpack. So we all like to use our, Molly line, black or, desert tan backpacks. But he said use a non-tactical one, so it's more discreet. A neck gaiter or mask, I guess if there's tear gas. A knife, whether it's a foldable or yeah. You're a patriot. You're wearing a flag gaiter. You're a good guy.
That is the first time I've ever seen all of Brendan's forehead.
Oh,
I didn't even really know that much forehead could it. Yeah, that's like a 5-head or a 6-head.
Yeah, that's the joke in the house. It's a 5-head.
Yeah.
Man.
Brendan's over here looking like he's held on to every thought he's ever had.
Yeah. My hair is an absolute mess.
So foldable knife, or a rigid knife. You mentioned a weapon and a spare magazine. Now I could get something a little bit off or wrong here, but this is generally what he put: a flashlight, a compass and a map, a TQ med kit, a water. He mentioned a specific number of water bottles, like the 16.0 ounce ones, like our standard Zephyr Hills ones. He specified a certain number of granola bars, protein bars, a foldable rain jacket, which you could probably use a poncho if you wanted. Like my rain jacket's foldable and I could fold it up into my pocket. A multi-tool, which is kind of, and a small pry bar. Those were a little bit, sketchy for me. Cash, a phone, and a phone battery bank and charger. Now, personally, to me, this is very close to, okay, hey, I want to go and be an Antifa type person or hang out in a protest. Okay. Because what are you doing in an area, so maybe you work in an area. Okay. But I mean, you got a small pry bar on there so you can pry a door open, pop a fence. I mean, I don't remember exactly what he was saying, why. So please, this is just me having some fun commentary on it. Please watch the video so you can get the true context and what he was saying. But I found that kind of interesting. And on a serious note, if law enforcement catches you, okay, with a small pry bar in your backpack, are they going to lean towards you are a participant in the protest or someone caught coming home from work?
So I want to add something to that. So one of the things that lives in my truck is a Sawzall, a battery-operated Sawzall. And next to that battery-operated Sawzall is both wood blades and metal blades. And the thought process behind it, and I've used it in this capacity, if hurricane comes and there's trees in the road and I don't have my chainsaw on me, I can clear enough of a lane that I can get through. Also, you can take Sawzall and cut through a chain or cut through a lock if there's an area that you need to get through. I'm not recommending breaking any laws.
Yeah.
One thing I've done in demolition jobs, you can take a Sawzall metal blade and shove it in between a door and a wall and then use that to cut the deadbolt and the latch or the hinges or whichever. Again, not recommending anything illegal. But the capabilities of having a battery-operated Sawzall and a pack of assorted blades is super. It's there. There's a lot of capability there. Now, for me, I work in construction. I've got tools all over my truck. If a cop was to search my vehicle, a Sawzall is not drawing any attention. Oh, look, it's another yellow tool. I'm a DeWalt guy. But I would venture to say a Sawzall in the trunk of a car would still probably draw less of an eye than like a tactical crowbar or what I would call burglary equipment, It just seems to me like it would draw less of an eye. I could be.
And hold on one second. So to be in fairness, okay, to the guy that made that podcast, I'm not saying he's affiliated one way or another with anybody.
Yeah, I'm not either. I'm just saying.
Because he had a lot of preparedness videos on there. It was a lot of, good content what I watched. Okay. I'm just kind of half joking with the pry bar, but being serious about it, really adding on to what you said earlier in the show, Aaron, about careful what you have and what you wear, because it can be interpreted, okay, by people or law enforcement in different ways. So And I bring this up in the context, if you're caught up in a protest, okay, and law enforcement's all over the place and you're there, you shouldn't, you got to, this is risk management here, okay? You know, you want to pack that in your bag, more power to you. You go ahead and do it. You just got to be cognizant of the fact that if you get caught up in the mix, law enforcement is going to sit there and do a wide net when there's problems. And if you happen to get caught up in there and you got that, you know, certain tools or weapons in your backpack, I mean, that kind of falls more on us, you know, if we're carrying. They're not really worrying about listening to your story. They're squashing the problem and worrying about that later. You know, that's why a lot of times, you know, we mention in previous videos is to not be in those spaces. Now, if you work there, you know, near there, it's out of your control. But I just want to make sure there's a difference between what we're joking about here and what we're serious about. So no shade on the guy. He had some good content, but we just want to make sure all that's clear. Go ahead, Aaron.
So I kind of tend to think that his stuff looks fairly reasonable to me. And that's because I spent about 6 or 7 years as a medical courier. I drove all over the greater area that, you know, we all live in. Like, I was driving pretty close to 100,000 miles a year. A lot of that was during the Black Lives Matter protests. And I noticed a couple of things about protests and protesters, right, that I really started paying attention to, because being able to move in an urban environment and have a conversation that's beneficial with police, but also be able to negotiate the social situations of dealing with a bunch of protesters who are probably not gathering in this large group because they're happy with the way things are going, right? Doesn't matter what they're protesting, but you don't get that because you like the status quo, right?
Yeah.
Those were major concerns of mine. And one of the things I noticed was a lot of the protesters, if you weren't hooked into certain cultures and certain, like it might be a chat room or, you know, a signal group or something like that, you know, the communications methodologies are constantly changing. You might be in a flash protest or a protest that wasn't really like scheduled anywhere where anybody could see it, that you had no idea that, you know, it was going on. I remember I was driving into Tampa General Hospital at the time on Davis Island. For people that are not familiar with our little bit of geography here in Florida, that's a fairly affluent area. It's not where you see the disenfranchised and the unwashed gather to air out their grievances on a typical day. And the parking garage that I was going in and out of when I was going to pick up from this one client was blocked by a bunch of people in scrubs holding a Black Lives Matter banner. And they all had surgical masks on, and they all had headgear on. Now, I knew, because I was around these people on a fairly regular basis, 5 days a week, that a lot of them were surgeons. But I did everything I could to avoid protests. Large groups of people going stupid places to do stupid things is not my idea of a good time anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe when I was younger, but I think we all had, you know, stupid phases in our lives. At least I know I did. But, you know, I would actually add to that, like, Dawn dish soap, a small thing of Dawn dish soap. Because let's say that you are at a protest, you know, in spite of your ruthers, right? And you get popped with whatever they're using to contain that crowd. Dawn dish soap is the only decontaminant that works worth a crap that I've found. And it's still not a fun process that gets off OC, right?
Yeah.
You scrub it off. Like during the protest, the guys were passing out milk because, hey, guys, like milk, you know, neutralizes capsaicin. It's science, bro. And my buddies who are actual cops and do riot training, or in the National Guard and do riot training, were laughing their heads off at that, because they're like, I cannot imagine how funny it is going to be to watch me get to like absolutely paint this hippie orange and he's just dumping TG Lee quart after quart of milk over his face and wondering why God hates him so much, and it's just not working. You know, the so stuff like that. I also tend to wear, like when I drive, I add a pair of safety glasses.
Mm-hmm.
I buy them cheap over at Lowe's or Home Depot. I found that the $6 glasses or $4 glasses that I buy over there break just as well as the $100 glasses that I've owned, and they also get lost just as well. The difference is I will only cry in one of those scenarios.
Yeah.
Right? I don't cry over the $6 glasses. I might shed a tear over a nice pair of Wiley X's.
Yeah.
You know, the Pribar thing, that's starting to get into some stuff that a lot of people think about and talk about in this stuff, and they're not having it as part of an open discussion.
Right.
So if you go up and you say, hey, you know, because of the press of the crowd, I was carried along with traffic, and now I'm somewhere where I don't want to be, and I go up into a doorway and the door is closed because the shop owner is concerned of what a mob might do.
Right.
Having a pry bar and a multi-tool and some ways to gain
entry,
involuntary access to a property or a location.
They might be dealing with a pissed off shop owner with a shotgun.
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
Rooftop
or you might be dealing, yeah, or you might be one of the guys who's, you know, drug along with a crowd where nobody looks like you and everybody goes, hey, we're here to protest something. A lot of the people that have pissed us off can catch a sunburn, just like that guy with the long hair and beard over there. Let's throw him to the ground and stop it to death.
Yeah.
You know, or you see, like in a lot of riots when they started dragging people out of cars. If you ever see somebody get dragged out of their vehicle, always watch the next 30 seconds of that video and tell me if it ever goes better now that the person's outside of their personal vehicle.
It's safe to say that it doesn't.
Yeah. So, you know, things like that, like without coming across as tactical Timmy, you know, which I flirt with that line constantly when I don't just, you know, cross it completely. I think this is probably fairly well put together. You know, I like the idea of having a straight up liter of water and like at least 1 liter that I could just dump on my head. And here's a little thing for those of us that haven't been pepper sprayed before, or those of you guys that might be watching that haven't been pepper sprayed before. Sometimes it gets all over anything.
Mm-hmm.
Pepper spray absorbs through mucous membranes. With oleoresin and capsaicin, the active ingredients in horseradish and peppers, hot peppers. If it gets on your crotch or your gluteus maximus
And
type
it will
area,
travel with sweat.
yeah, it really will. I banked on it. Everybody I've sprayed, I love gravity and sweat, and this is Florida, man. So being able to dump a little bit of soap on yourself and decontaminate yourself may make the difference between you making it past a police cordon and not, because who's going to make it past the guys who look like they've just gotten painted orange with whatever the coloring agent is in the spray that they deployed on the crowd, or the guy that looks like, you know, okay, like you don't look like you got the worst of it. Maybe you were just on the outskirts, you know, waving through. We've got bigger fish to fry. You know, oh, that guy was calling shots in there. He definitely needs to, you know, ride the lightning for a little bit before we put him back in the back of the car. You know, so stuff like that. And, you know, the other thing too is, in more of a joking way, you're already carrying a freaking weapon and a spare magazine in this bag. So I don't think the pry bar is really going to be what raises eyebrows at that point.
Yeah.
You know, and that's like, for me, you know, just kind of finishing that up though, like for me, I also add a lot of some stuff to this. Like when I know I'm going to be in an urban environment, where potentially large groups of people may want to do me harm by working as a team, I tend to have more than just a pistol available.
Mm-hmm.
Carrying that in non-tactical ways, although I don't do it anymore, so I'll mention it, you know, in open source stuff here. I, being a recent father, have gotten away with carrying a lot of crap in a diaper bag.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody sees that, oh, he's got, butt paste and wipes and baby diapers and stuff like that. I was like, yeah, the pocket behind that one's like 3 happy sticks for my Glock and a blowout kit and, some stuff for entry, like a little, rapid hacksaw that I can go through metal with, just me, by hand if I need to. And like, so yeah, I love the idea of the phone, battery bank, and charger
And that
on
makes
that
a lot of
too.
sense. Yeah.
Well, it's
I
like,
mean,
what are you going to use this stuff more for, right?
right.
I own a company where we teach people edge weapon self-defense. And yet I still find myself opening more Amazon packages with my really cool folding knife from Cold
Yeah.
Steel than I ever have people. I think that's actually a successful life story for me.
Yeah.
I'm living right. I'm not having to zip open a person nearly as much as my Amazon addiction is having me zip open, Amazon boxes.
Yeah. Well, for all the knives that I've had and stuff like that, this, let's see if I can show this little one. Let me see.
Yeah, I can see
I
that.
use this more than anything else. Where it's cutting a little wire or a thread off of something, opening a package, getting a tag off of clothes. I have other knives. I have. Let's see here. I did all kinds of research, watched all kinds of videos on this, and it's usually on my my day pack if I'm hiking. But I've never had to use it other than maybe with a little wood or something like that. I didn't have to kill any wild boar with it, or cut off the rattle of a snake, and I'm okay with it.
Well, that's, when you start going into what you use,
Mhm.
I'm a big fan of carry what you use and use what you carry.
Yeah.
So I probably reach for my pocket knife, which is bigger than most people are comfortable in normal social situations. When I'm like with my wife's nice side of the family,
Yeah.
they're like, "Oh my God, why do you have a knife in your pocket that big?" Because you just asked me to use it and you don't have one,
Yeah.
right? But if I reach for that thing 6 times in a normal day, I'm constantly checking its status. I
Yeah.
know, hey, oh, let's get a little sticky there. Guess we need some oil, right? Or, oh, this isn't hair popping sharp anymore like it used to be. Like I need to sit down with a diamond stone while wife watches reality TV and like, do a little touch up or something. Um, that to me is like that's the key with all of this stuff because by having the phone battery bank and charger in there,
Yep.
I guarantee you that guy's probably going to go into that bag at least a couple times a week.
Yeah.
The number one thing, like we ran into with med kits when we started putting med kits in churches with a buddy of mine, like people would go in there and snag stuff because it was easier. They saw the big red med bag up on the wall
Yeah.
and they go in for freaking Tylenol. They wouldn't put everything back packed the way it was. So this
Yeah.
thing was like crapped out. But like if you didn't go in and like redo it every once in a while, it was just everything was everywhere. You'd be missing half the stuff and like, while somebody's leaking dude juice all over the place, that's not the time to try to figure out where you put my freaking tourniquet when you went in for my doll last week.
Yeah.
Like that's not a great time. So, I think having stuff in there that he'll use on a regular basis. I add like when I fly, I carry a big bandana for a lot of reasons. Like I've used it as a pre-filter for water that was sketchy. Um, I've used it to cool myself off. Brendan can tell you, I sweat when I think about sweating.
Mhm.
Once the train gets rolling, like I'm a moist dude. So being able to throw a little cold water on it, throw it on the back of my neck has saved my butt a couple of times. And I mean, there's some other uses for it. It can be an involuntary tourniquet. Um, if somebody's engaging in antisocial behavior, I'll just apply it around their neck and still use a
Yeah.
tourniquet like action. So yeah, worked for the thuggies in India. I'm a big fan
Yeah.
of the classics, like we said before. So it's just things to think about, as we go through. And like I said, I don't think this is a bad deal. I'd probably go with the do rag, or even like the little shop towels in there. Having a couple of those in there. Baby wipes is another big one, um, for just moving around. If you have to talk to somebody in an official capacity and you smell like you've just been around 100 unwashed people, do you think you will be better or worse received if you take
Yeah.
5 minutes around a corner to hit the pits, the boobs, and a couple of things down south, and gussy yourself up a little bit before you go try to ask somebody for a favor?
Yeah.
And the pry bar thing, to me, like, once again, I remember talking to buddies who deployed to Iraq, and that was like the number one way knives got broken, was because they would use them as a pry bar.
Ah,
They're like, dude, we were constantly opening stuff up as a pry bar. Or there's a website called CountyCom that usually sells a little pry bar deal. It's got a little chisel head on one side. That thing is so freaking awesome. I've had one of my buddies who's a firefighter. He uses that to get into places all the time. And it's the most non-tactical looking stuff. He's like, yeah, I painted safety orange so that when I've got this piece of 5160 bar stock, like, it's safe because it's orange.
Yeah. This is a safety tool.
Yeah. But he's like, yeah, and it's also got some calm down in it for tweakers and people like that might be acting up. I was like, well, yeah, at the end of the day, dude, it still is a pound-and-a-half piece of steel.
Yeah. All right, that's cool. I think I'm going to save the other kits for other conversations. We covered a
Do
lot of
part
different,
two.
yeah, a lot of different things. And then yeah, maybe when we do part two, we'll do a little, hey, this is what I would change in this bag, or this is what I would have in this bag. Get a little bit more details, so that would be fun. I'm a big fan of, if we could have multiple things covered with one tool, then I'm good. So for a while, my work knife, okay, because every time I go to a city walk or somewhere and I forget to leave my knife in the car, my little pocket knife, I end up putting it in the trash, But I have this one. Let's see if we can get it in there. Okay. So what's important about this, if you look right here, window shatter thing.
Yep.
Seatbelt cutter. Yeah. And then a decent size blade with some serration here. Let me so you guys can see. And then it has what this thing is here. It's a little ferro rod that you could use. It has a little light too that comes out, but the light always breaks. It's like a Walmart knife. And I tend to buy little multi-packs and stuff like that because, like you guys, buying cheaper things because it's kind of almost disposable. So if you lose it or it breaks, no big deal. And it covers the tasks that I need to do,
Yep.
I mean, there's a lot of guys that they buy knives that are super expensive.
Yeah. This is $15.
Yeah.
And you mentioned City Walk, right?
Yeah.
So this is completely non-metallic.
Oh, ceramic. Is it ceramic?
Yep. Won't peg on a metal detector. Doesn't show up very well on the X-ray machine.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, Brendan's got that.
3D printed in ceramic, and it just lives on my keys.
See?
Yep. But like stuff like that, not that I'd ever say for anyone to break laws, but sometimes you're doing delicate electrical work and you want something that, won't conduct a current, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds good. But, that's kind of where like a lot of these conversations end up going, because as you get away from the more socially acceptable stuff and you realize, hey guys, we're really looking to be self-reliant in a time when social order has broken down. The rule of law is no longer in effect, and nobody's playing nice in the sandbox anymore.
Right.
So, I'm huge on respecting property rights, and I'm not a thief. And anymore at this stage in my life. Like, but if, property right or everything's broken down and I have to move my wife and daughter out of a, very concerning situation, that pry bar is probably like, the shotgun wheel.
You're breaking up, Aaron. He's so caught up in thought. We'll give him a second. While we're waiting there, Brendan, is any final things you want to chime in about? Talk about? This would be your time to do it.
No, like I said with the packs, mine's scalable. So depending on what I'm doing, I got one pack for 3 days. I got a box to add if I want to add on a week or two, and so on and so forth. Skills, that's your biggest thing, man.
Yeah.
It's practicality and skills. So
Yeah.
have your vehicle loaded to where you can be your own rescue in your vehicle. Have the skills to do it. I showed a grown man the other day how to plug a tire, which is one of those little $12 tire
Little
plug
tire
kits.
kits?
He had never seen one before. And that's not a knock on him. He just never seen one.
Yeah.
And it was weird to me because I had a flat tire, and he's like, "Oh no, what are we gonna do? We'll take it off and we'll take the tire in my truck down to the tire shop." I was like, "Oh, I got a compressor and a tire plug kit, and bam, within 5 minutes, I got the tire plugged and aired up." And he's like, "Oh my god, that's so convenient." I was like, "Yeah." My wife, one of my wife's favorite things to say recently was, "Thank God for a prepper husband," because there's been so many situations recently that something was to happen, but because we've set things up to make life easy, and it's not giant things, it'll be, we lost power for a few hours the other day, but because of my setup for hurricanes, I was able within 15 minutes. We had the generator started. I had a bunch of fans blowing throughout the house to keep the house cool because it's Florida and 80 degrees in the dark.
Mm-hmm.
So, but because, the freezers were on the solar and the fans were on the generator, my wife was sitting pretty and talking to our neighbors on the phone, and they're all complaining about the heat. My wife's trying not to brag. It's like, it's been funny these last couple of weeks. I've heard it like 3 times in the last month. Thank God for a prepper husband. And it's just that little bit of validation. Just make you feel good.
Oh yeah, Aaron. So when you froze over there, I just turned to Brendan to kind of give his final thoughts and comments about anything. So I'll give you that opportunity now.
No, I think I'm pretty good on this. Can't wait to do part 2, hopefully with less technical details or technical interruptions.
Yeah, I think this was a great conversation. I was really trying to gear this to where, obviously we're focusing on the philosophy and the psychology of it. I just hope it creates a conversation starter for some people to reevaluate how they're doing things and, really just pare down. It's more fun to do preparedness if you're using the gear. So if you need another reason, there's one right there. So,
yeah.
And
doing this stuff is fun.
Yeah. It's a pretty fun, productive hobby, I have to say. And then doing this kind of outreach with everybody with the podcasts and the activities and stuff like that. So, and speaking of activities, we had the solar DIY and medical tinctures activity this past Saturday out in Missouri K-Town near Brooksville. And that was great. It was good turnout. If you guys notice, I switched up hats tonight. Okay. This hat is actually for the Florida Barter Hub. So that's Sam's one of his crews, and Sam was the main presenter for the solar stuff, and he has some hats there, so I was able to pick up one, and it's pretty cool. Looks like a leather patch here and everything. I like the colors. Interesting thing, I met, because this is the West Coast section, because they have it divided up in different parts of Florida, and Marcos, I think his name is, he's the East Coast guy. He drove all the way over, and he came and hung out and was shooting the breeze with everybody. He's a younger guy. I don't know if you got a chance to meet him, Aaron, when he was here.
Yeah, I did. I got to talk to him quite a bit, actually.
So that was kind of cool because, other than Brendan, there's not really a lot of younger guys that actually come and hang out. They might do the virtual stuff, the different networks that I have, but it was good to see that, it's nice to bring the younger people in, and, they got different outlooks on things and everything. So, and it helps broaden the audience. So with that being said, just to give a heads up, our next activity is going to be Sunday, July 27th, up out at the ranch. And we're going to have a couple of security presentations and a couple of wilderness first aid presentations. So looking forward to that. You guys will get more information as we get out there. So until then, thank you everyone for coming out. Please remember to like and subscribe. And you know what? If you can, send a link to any of our videos to people that might potentially even like it. Tell them what you liked, you didn't like about the videos. Throw some comments in there. We're always looking for ways to make the content better and, more interesting to a broader audience. And just to get people subscribing makes a difference. Watching it, sharing it with other people. And we're not monetized. We're not going to be monetized, but we just want to make a better product and experience for everybody, not just for us, but for you guys as well. So until next time, thanks for watching, and y'all have a great evening. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please remember to like and subscribe and share with your friends. We will see you next time.